Welcome back to the Manage to Win podcast. We've got Chris Dyer on the show today. He's a culture expert. He's got 7 pillars that he teaches. Does a lot of keynotes, very engaging and very candid. And there's a lot of things you can learn here about how to strengthen your culture step by step, systematically, really engage your people. I mean, he has been named a fastest growing company by Inc. magazine 5 times. He's been ranked number 1 as far as a leadership speaker. This guy's got a lot of good stuff. Let's dive in. Chris, thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. You have had amazing success with culture. How many cultures have you had best in class or best place to work or whatever it is? Like 15 of them or something like that?
Yeah, some crazy number. I don't know. We've had a lot.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. Congratulations. You know, I think the audience, when they first probably read about what this podcast we're going to talk about, thought, oh, I wonder what the one thing is I need to do about culture. But is it one thing, or is it more of a system where you need to be doing things regularly, not just flipping a switch and, okay, we got good culture, we're good to go?
So you're right. It's not one thing. There's not a magic bullet like, oh, if you just do this one little thing, culture will be great. I do have one maybe like mindset shift that may be helpful if someone's looking for like, what's one thing I can do today? And that might be to go back and think about how do you get better as a culture, better as a team, better as a company, better at sales, whatever that thing is, 1% at a time.
Yeah.
And that was a big shift for us, right? Instead of, it's so hard for our people. We walk in the room as senior leaders or as owners and we're like, we're going to double sales this year. And then people go like, okay, boss, like, cool, that's cool. How the hell do I do that? Right? Yeah. And you think about, well, how do we get more sales or how do we improve this process? 1% all the time, every meeting, every day. People get excited about that because that's something they can do that's tangible. They can think about what's that small shift, change thing. And that's how I ultimately changed my organization and every organization I've gone in and worked with. It's not, we're going to become this. It's how do we just get a little better, a little better, a little better. How do we make work for everybody?
Yeah, and I mean, my weakness years ago, I learned the hard way that I had leadership attributes, but no skills. And one of my main flaws was not being systematic. Mm-hmm. So it's not just that 1% you do it once and then, oh, let's go look at this other shiny object that's over here. But it's then you have to repeat it, right? You have to not only do that one thing, but then what's the system or process we put in place? So since it worked, we're going to keep doing it.
And that's really been my focus. That's what my book and my keynotes and everything is about is what are those things you're supposed to focus on? What do we know from research, from observation, from real in the field, practical know-how? What are those things that matter? Because there's a million things that we could do.
Oh, yeah.
Shiny object syndrome every moment, and it's only gotten worse. Social media and AI and everything has just given us this dopamine hit of I can watch somebody's 1-minute video and be like, oh, that's cool, I should do that. That's cool, I should do that. Yeah. But we know, no matter what shiny object you're under, if it's good, it's going to be under one of these 7 pillars. And if it falls under one of those, you're on the right track. And if you're really, really good at maybe a couple of the pillars that I talk about, cool, leave those alone. And if you really suck at one of the pillars I talk about, like that's where you ought to be putting your attention. If you're going to have a shiny object, let it show up there and try to get better there.
Interesting. I want to go back to that in a moment, but first of all, I want to trail back to what you said about 1% better. I heard a guy on the podcast, I can't remember who it was, recently, and he was talking about, he's one of these competitive dads, like many of us are, particularly when I was younger, but not now as much. And his daughter was trying out with a couple of colleges to play lacrosse and met with one coach. And, the tryout seemed to go okay, where she was scrimmaging with the team and stuff. And then the daughter came over to the dad, and the coach came over and said, hey, you were 1% better today. And the dad's thinking, oh God, only 1% better. That's not good enough. And then the coach continued and said, you do that every day, in 100 days, you're 100% better. And if we do that as a team, we're massively better. Keep it up. Good job. Turned around, walked away. And that's what struck me when you said that 1% is how you build on that. Did you have a story about how that you had a team that maybe didn't totally buy into the 1% initially, but when they did, how it transformed them?
Well, I can certainly tell you, like, prior to me making that a focus and culture a focus, we came in with every big idea, big goal, tried to do stuff, and we were just a mediocre business doing it really well and never did anything great.
Yeah.
So we had we had the right things in place. We had big sales goals and, words up on the wall and our values. But it wasn't until we kind of reframed it to, let's just try to get a little bit, what is that thing we can do today to get a little bit better? And because that's palatable for people, right? It's hard to say this out loud, but if you're a senior exec, if you have a high amount of experience, maybe you have particular gift in the thing that you're doing for your company, you might be significantly in a better position to do some of these things. Whereas your average person you've hired, wherever they are in their career, they're not that person. They haven't spent a great deal of time thinking deeply about your business. They're like, hey, you asked me to show up and do customer service. That's what I'm here to do and get my paycheck. And like, how do you engage that person to think about, how can I make that call a little bit better? How do we get our, if we got our customer service rating 1% better today or this week or this month, again, you're right, it accumulates over time.
Yeah.
So when we went back, we started doing the Net Promoter Score at my organization years ago. And we had we were in the 30s, which is pretty good for a lot of industries. Eventually we got ourselves in the 40s, at 40%. And like for a car dealership, if you're a 40, you're like the top 0.1
Wow.
of all, right? Like that, car dealerships don't do very well, like in those stores, but for 40 for them is really, really good. And in our industry, when we got to 44, we were in the top 2 or 3 companies in the whole industry.
Wow.
Customer service score. But I'm looking at that score going, why are we not getting higher? And so instead of going back to my team and saying, I want it to be 60 or I want it to be 50, I said, all I want you all to do is just think about how you can get 1% better. Just a little tiny tweaks here and there. What is that thing we can do? And within 1 year, we were at 60. At another year, we were at 80. Well, I had sold a bit in the 90s, right? Which is just, that's top class. I mean, for any industry, there are industries where getting a 60, 70, 80 is top of the industry. But I never came in with this hard goal like I had done before.
Yeah.
Right? And then they feel pressure. Well, we're not getting that. We're not getting that goal. And that client's not giving us that thing. And it's really hard for them to find their way. It's almost like they're in a dark room trying to find the switch and they just don't know what to do. But when I tell them, I just need you to do this tiny little thing in your own way, you decide how you get there, right?
Yeah.
Empowering them. And they took that on as their mantra to get 1% better. They did it, right? Whereas for the 7 or 8 years prior to that, I've been giving them a goal that they kept failing to meet.
Yeah. And is it also, I remember one guest in particular, but I've had others that talk about how making each interaction really superior, making it the best. And I like you focusing on the 1%, but this concept of how do you make it the best? And the reason I'm bringing this up is tied to what you're saying, but it also to bring in, with AI and all these other crazy things that are happening, there's a lot of rumors about job replacement, blah, blah, blah. But if a human being is truly having stay with the term, superior interaction with somebody else, and you talk a lot about communication, and then ends it strongly, has clear action items, follows up, there's no machine that can do that. Would you agree, or am I wrong? Am I just still being optimistic?
There might be a machine. There might be a AI that can be smart enough. I mean, I've been really surprised at the speed at which things have gotten so much better and so much surprisingly better, right? So there's going to be this need for the human involvement, at least while you and I were alive. But here's the thing that we need to think about. So you kind of articulated a particular type of interaction that a customer might want.
Yeah.
What we discovered was that was not necessarily true for all customers. Some customers valued speed in response.
Right.
Not that I give them some great experience. They just wanted an answer quickly. Even if it was a bad answer, a crappy answer, an answer they didn't want, they just wanted an answer quickly. That was the most important thing.
Yeah.
So we developed our systems to be faster. Then there were some that wanted the red carpet, platinum level experience. And so we actually would group those people into a different group. So we had essentially created in our software, if it was this type of client, they would get this type of an experience, right? And so we would give them the platinum level experience if they were a big client and they spent a lot of money with us and or referred a lot of business and things like that. When they call in, they go right, and we know they wanted a human being, right? They went right to a human being. Whereas somebody else who's, I just want a quick response, they went right into our ticket system, right? And that we could have a person or an AI or somebody quickly get them the data that they needed. So that's how we got 1% better, was by not trying to create one experience that worked for everybody, but how do we create a lot of varied experiences that meets the needs of many different types of client profiles and what they really want out of the experience.
And how did you teach your people to read the person who's contacting them? They have to make an assessment. This person wants just a summary. This person wants gobs of detail. Do they want both? Is this going to have to be interactive? How do you teach them to read that?
So part of it was, in high-level conversations, our more senior leaders and stuff would be involved in those and trying to make those articulations. But probably the most important tool we did was at the end of a ticket. So everything ended up in a ticket, right? Okay. Even if we didn't have that conversation with them, we would follow up in a customer service ticket with a summary of what we talked about or with whatever the outcome was. And at the bottom, it was, please give us, it was like, how did we do? And I just had a very simple sad face, a medium face that was yellow, the sad face was red, and a smiley face that was green. They would click that, and if they clicked, again, I'm varying the responses. If they clicked bad, it was like, we're so sorry you're not happy. Please help us understand why.
Yeah.
And if they did, and they said, well, you took too long to get back to me, they valued quickness, right? So it started to get their responses, and over a pretty quick period of time, I could figure out what do they really care about.
Yeah.
Right. And if it was, well, I didn't feel like the agent really listened to me. I didn't feel like they really understood my problem. They didn't really address it. This is more of a plot, and they want the high touch. They need someone to really, right? So we can start to articulate that just based on those survey responses.
Yeah.
Now, there were people who never replied to the survey. And so what do you do? So I remember reading this really interesting story back in World War II, where they were trying to figure out how to help that more airplanes survive when they were going and dropping bombs. And they went and looked at basically the damage and the bullet holes in the wings of the airplanes. And so on the ground, the people there, the pilots, the soldiers, the military, they all said, we need to drastically reinforce the wings, okay, where we're seeing all these holes come in. We drastically reinforce the wings in order to have more come back. They sent the same question, though, to a room full of mathematicians. And the mathematicians came back and said, we need the missing data. And I remember that just grabbed onto my skull, and I've never forgotten it. Okay, well, in this instance, the missing data was the airplanes that crashed. They'd only looked at the planes that came back, and they were making a decision about how to protect all planes when they didn't have any of the data about the planes that actually went down because they crashed and burned up and they were there. And so that got them thinking, we actually need to give the whole plane a generally more protection, not just on the wings, because the ones that just got hit on the wings were the ones that made it back. The ones that on their spots, they went down. So we could have made a critically wrong decision about how to protect planes back in World War II had we not thought about the missing data. And so we were always saying, what's the missing data here? The missing data was, what about the people who never clicked the survey? And so I sent my head of customer service, it was her job every month to try to figure out who didn't answer it, and was there someone she needed to go and get on a phone call with, and try to extrapolate that data herself or one of her team members so that we could get that missing data and make sure we were thinking about them in the right way.
So did you ever have something come back from that was surprising? There was a pretty significant deviation from the direction you thought you needed to go.
Yeah, I mean, we had clients tell us that they needed more data in the response. We had people that said, again, it was just about the speed. I think the speed one was probably the biggest one we were hearing. I'm okay with good news, bad news, whatever. I just need you to tell me quicker. And so I remember we were really in that mindset of when we respond, we want to be able to give them the right answer and the full answer. My team was very stuck on this idea of being able to give them the correct answer.
Yeah.
And that was a mindset shift that most clients didn't need. Was going to be the correct answer. They needed the answer that was right now. What is it we know right now? Just tell me that. So they can then go and make decisions on their end based on where we are today. Because they understood we may not know. We might be waiting out of their source. We used to pull court records. I mean, it could take a long time sometimes to find out the correct answer. It could be a week or two delay. They just needed to know that information, right?
Yeah.
Are we delayed a week? Just tell me we're delayed a week. Then I'll come back to you in a week. I understand there's a problem here and come back. So that was a big shift for us to realize that they wanted now, not perfect.
Yeah, but in perfect having two meanings, one is flawless and one is complete. You are being perfect by giving them the complete answer that they needed at that moment. And did your people also learn to say, there's been a delay a week, would you like me to get more detail for you? Or do you want to just check back in a week? Or did you just give them the short version?
Yeah, so we also had to create loops in our internal system that if we were telling them we expected this to come back in a week, or we would follow up back in a week, how do we make sure that we had a trigger on our side so that when it was a week, and if things changed or it was going to take longer, that we were already preemptively, like we were the ones at 1 week coming back to the client and saying, I promised you I'd come back in a week. Been a week. Here's the update.
Yeah. Or I told you it would be a week and you beat them to calling you back.
We had that too. That was always like, hey, good news. It's been 3 days and we were able to get it quicker. Yeah. So we were creating those moments too of like, surprise, a good surprise. But, again, the client would get annoyed if they had to come back to us after a week for the next date. So it was creating those triggers internally. Again, those are all little things that we built over a long period of time. I just kept, what could we have done in this situation to make this client happier? Well, they wanted us to come back to them before they came back to us. Cool. How do we build that in? How do we do, right? Yeah. These are all little moments of reflection. And sometimes there was nothing we could do. Sometimes we didn't have an answer. There wasn't a 1% improvement here, but there was somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Now, you have defined 7 pillars, and you referenced that a moment ago where you said, if you're strong on these pillars, but you're weak in these ones, focus on the weak ones. One question I have for you, and then I'd love for you to walk us through those, is if people are strong, so, we do assessments of behaviors and driving forces and, people's competencies. And I come out of it and I teach people because a lot of people approach the reports and they're like, where am I bad? Where am I weak? And I'm like, well, first thing I want you to look at is where you're strong. Mm-hmm. Build on where you're strong, because a lot of times you build on your strengths, it addresses the weaknesses, at least partially. Have you found that at all when you're working with the pillars in an organization and trying to get those firmly established that when they're weak in some areas, sometimes it can help to work on the strengths, because that may spill over? Or is it really where they need to dive in because it's more specific to the pillar where they're weak and they need to dive in that area to really address it?
Well, this is actually the positivity pillar. And what you're referencing is a whole body of work called appreciative inquiry, which is how do we focus on what's working? How do we get better? How do we do more with what we do well based on our strengths? And so what I will say from an individual's perspective, it is absolutely the right way to think about it. We should be leveraging our strengths, getting better at our strengths, and finding ways to offload work that we are weak at to other people where it's a strength for them. How do we do more of what we're good at, have other people do the things that we're not good at, and get that better alignment internally? There are some areas in your life where you can't ignore your weaknesses, probably at home with your spouse, interpersonal relationships, but at work, it's especially true that we can really show up and do the thing that we're good at, right? That's got to be, we all have to do some things that we don't like to do and all that, but the more we can do in that good, better, right area is great. As leaders, can we focus on what's working, what's good? I mean, if every time we hire or we attract this kind of client that's high profit, that's easy to work with, like, why aren't we spending time and getting like 10 more of those when stop trying to get these other kind of clients in this other vertical that doesn't work, it's low profit? Like, we need to think about it that way.
Yeah.
From an organization standpoint, which is not an individual, which is not a human being and is not about that way. We do need the organization to be better in those larger areas as a discipline, as a pillar, right? If we want our people to be happier, if we want ultimately work to work for everyone, meaning higher performance, higher productivity, higher profits, all 7 of these things have to be working. So first one was that positivity pillar, positive leadership and all that. The second pillar is transparency. Then we have measurement, uniqueness, listening, recognition, and then how we deal with mistakes. Don't know if I missed one or not, but
That's fine. And I really like the way you differentiated the two between our personal lives or who we are as a person, an individual, versus where we're on a team, where we're within an organization. Makes perfect sense. But why don't you walk the audience through each of these pillars? And I'd love it if you could tie a story to each one, whether it's before or after or whatever it is, but a story just so they can say, oh, well, that's very interesting. But then they can get some meat on the bone. They can say, oh, that's specifically how I can see how it applies.
So with positivity, probably the best story I can tell you is that we used to spend a lot of time thinking about helping, coaching, prodding, hiring and firing people that were not performing on our sales team. Okay, so I had 20-something salespeople, and I had 2 or 3 of them that were amazing. I mean, we left them alone. They were over in the corner. Don't screw them up. Like, they're awesome. Then we had a whole bunch of people kind of making their quota in the middle. And then we had, 2, 3, sometimes 5 or 6 people that were under their quota, underperforming, not doing well.
Yeah.
So much time and energy went into those people. Wow. Right? Instead, the mind shift here is that what are those top people doing? What makes them successful? Getting really curious about that, talking to them, finding that out. And then the second shift is not to pull it out of them and then turn around and go tell everyone what to do. It's instead have them help articulate that and then get them to go train everybody else. Because peer-to-peer works much better than top-down.
Yeah.
If the best salesperson on the team and you're the worst salesperson on the team comes and tells you, hey, this is how I'm being successful. This is what I do. Here are my techniques. Here are my scripts. Here are my approaches. Here's who I go after. You're going to listen, right? That the CRO comes to you and says, you suck. Go start doing it this way. Probably it's not going to go very well. You're going to be passive aggressive. You're going to quit, or I don't know. Something's going to happen. So what I found was when we did that, people got a lot better, or they self-selected out. Very rarely did we have to fire those performers. They either said, this is not for me, and went somewhere else once they realized what it took to be successful, right? When they saw that, like, you are, I will go somewhere else. Great, they left on their own. And till we got to the point where we never had anybody who was underperforming. Yeah, we still always had the top of the top, but we got to where everyone was at least at quota or above quota, and they were doing what we expected of them, which is more than you can typically ask for in a large sales organization.
And did that also lead you to change how you were hiring so that you were more interacting with players trying out for your team? So you were testing those things. Do the attributes of those superstars or your solid role players, are they exhibiting that as they're trying out for our team?
What I noticed about those, like I remember one time with a deep dive about our top three. They had totally different personality personas. Their strengths were different with strength finders. Their disc assessment was very different, right?
Yeah.
One was very strong, DI. One was a very high steady at SC, like totally different person, right? But they were attracting different types of clients and able to resonate with different types of people in different markets because of their personalities. Now, they had certain habits that were very similar. And that was the interesting part. So from a personality standpoint, though, we got away from from a strengths finders. I'm only going to hire people who have woo and achiever in their top 5. Well, that gets you one kind of salesperson.
Yeah.
But you want different types of people. So it was more of those habits. But what it did allow us to do is say in those interviews, listen, our top 3 people, these are their habits. This is what they do. Is that who you are? Do you think you can come in and do that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Because if you're not one person is making 200 phone calls a day, that's how they're successful. The other person, they have incredible partnerships and deep resume, a deep Rolodex of people. Like they've got relationships up the wazoo. That's how they work, right? And so you can kind of look and see, what does that person coming in have? Sometimes they would have something new, and that was cool to hire them and see if that other thing they have is going to work. So, it was a good way to have that conversation. But I will tell you, like, hiring a salesperson always felt like rolling the dice every single time.
Yeah, they're the hardest.
You thought were going to be fantastic, just terrible. The ones you thought, well, this is stupid to hire, and then they end up doing great. Like, it is really hard to know with salespeople. So.
But I think I really like what you talk about, and then I got asked this, and I say something similar, that, the behavioral profile, you can have success in certain roles like sales with different profiles, but you bring up a really good point. There has to be some certain core habits of the individual that make it work with their particular profile. I remember decades ago, I was at a company in a sales role, and I was just like, I'm going to work hard. I still had not learned to work smart. So I was just like hard work. And there was another guy who was, working remotely, and his thing was he'd figure out who the decision maker was, and he'd go play golf with him, or he'd go play racquetball. And, it was Mr. Easygoing, and he just found that influencer. He developed a relationship with them, and he nailed it. And we would vie for top sales slots, which is totally different style. And I think there's actually, it sounds like you decided there was a strength in having that diversity in style on the sales team. It seems like it was very wise.
Yeah, and there were people that beat the door down, they'd wear them down. That was one kind of sales. Like, if you cheerful, I had a guy that's all he ever did was just golf, hang out. I mean, we try to keep him out of as many meetings as possible because that was time he was not spending with somebody, and he'd go to the conference and come back with 10 contracts.
Yeah.
And he was probably doing hardly anything except maybe building, nothing, but he was building relationships during that time. So by the time he got there, he could do that.
Yeah.
So a totally different approach. Yeah.
Okay. So we got the first pillar is the positivity.
Yeah.
Right.
Second pillar is transparency.
Okay.
And so transparency shows up in a lot of ways. Are we sharing goals? Are we sharing internally about what we're trying to do? Are we providing as much information as possible? But the story you asked for, is that I started sharing our P&L, our summary, every single month on a company-wide call to everyone in the company. And here's how we make the money. Here's where it's going well. Here's how we're spending the money. Are we profitable? Are we not profitable? How is this tracked to our goals and what we're trying to do? And ultimately, it helped us do a few things. One, if we were doing well, that gave people pride and that things are going well. Things were not going well. They wanted to know from me and the other senior leaders, what are we doing about it? How are we going to fix this? What's the plan? And that gave them comfort and safety with that. Okay. Or maybe it was something seasonal. There were certain months in the year we were always a little out of whack. And we could explain those trends that, hey, listen, we did great last year. March is always terrible. And it was terrible this time. And just so they understand the story, right?
Yeah.
But what came out of that was a big surprise was that people started asking really good questions. So we would give the detail of the P&L that was related to the department. So like my research team, we would give them all of what we spent money on that related to their department, not salaries and stuff, but like the vendors and stuff.
Yeah.
And they started saying things like, well, why do we have this many vendors over here for this? Like, couldn't we combine it into one or two vendors, get a discount? Like, oh, yeah, we could do that. So they had these great ideas. Someone was like, why are our healthcare costs so high? That's, my brother-in-law, Ted, can get us a better deal on our healthcare plan. And then turned out Ted could, right? So like, we started coming up with ideas.
Yeah.
We never said, go save money. I never said we need to cut costs. I never said I'm going to give people bonuses. I just started giving them the information and they started coming back to me or whoever with these ideas. And that within a year, we were 30% more profitable.
Yeah. And two thoughts there. One is that I teach there's 4 management disciplines, how you hire, manage, develop, and retain people. And when you hire the right people and then do what you're talking about, Chris, you got a strong company culture, they're going to care. It's actually kind of a test too. If you present the information, they'll shrug their shoulders. It's like, the bells should go off that, warning bells that you've got a problem because the culture is not strong. They're not asking questions. They're not making suggestions. So I think that's really powerful. One thing for the audience though, too, just so you can be specific on the transparency piece, were you giving every little dollar amount about here's our dollar profit or here's our percentage profit, or were you speaking more in some generalities that gave them the information they needed to know, but did not reveal something that possibly should remain confidential?
Yeah. So we provided the summary P&L, which if anybody has ever seen the P&L, there's a summary that just says total payroll at, this dollar, total amount of this is this. We provided that in advance as a PDF to everyone in the company. And then we would go through it and talk about it on the call. Now, I did a 30-minute call. And so that part I did in like 3 or 4 minutes. This is a very high level. This is what we did last month. This is how it compares to the month before. And how does that compare to that month last year? That was the things I was giving them. So there was nothing like, how much does that specific person make in payroll or whatever, like none of that detail. Yeah. But we were giving them, the departments, the detail that mattered so they could evaluate how their money was being spent in the ways in which they have knowledge to impact that.
Yeah.
And so the head of research would have a team meeting there and they would say, okay, now you guys might have noticed that our research costs have gone up 5% since last year. Here's all the data. Let's take a look at it. Why is that? Well, this thing went up and that thing went down. Okay, what can we do to make that better? So they were having those conversations only because we gave them the information.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise, they're just, I'm just going to keep doing the work over and over and over again. You told me to take this hammer and hit it on this rock. That's all I'm going to do all day long. If I give you a report on how you could do that better, or what is the impact of the work you're doing, you can then make better reflections, right? And this is huge because if you're not doing this in your organization now, this is the kind of work that will matter more and more and more as AI is taking more of the easy, is taking the hammer, hitting the rock work away from our people are going to spend more time thinking about how to do the work, why to do the work, where can we do it differently and better. That's the human part that's going to last.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. I'm with you. All right. So we got the first two. We've got positivity. We got transparency.
Yeah. The next one is listening. So we have to listen to our clients. We talked about how we did that in customer service. We kind of have that story there. Also, how do you listen to your employees? So I adamantly hate the annual survey. I think it's one of the stupidest inventions ever created. So I suggest you do a 1 question per week survey. Ask your people 1 question at a time, because you ask, they tell, you can reflect and tell them what you're going to do about it and make changes or whatever the appropriate response is. Again, it's almost like that 1% at a time. You can make incremental small changes that make sense and people feel the impact. I told you how I felt. I saw you made a change.
Yeah.
Or you did something with the information that was the right thing. So I would ask on Wednesday the question, tell them they had until Friday to answer. And then by the following Tuesday, I would report back to them. This was the question I asked. This is what I heard. Sometimes I told them their answers were confidential. Sometimes I told them, I'm going to share your answers with the whole company. So be forewarned. And then that depended on what the question was. If I asked, who in the company has been killing it for us that we should be recognizing, that's something I'm going to share with everybody.
Yeah.
When I said, how am I as your CEO getting in your way? I might keep those answers a little more private, but I'm going to share what I heard, the general sentiment of it, right? And report back to them, hey, I'm hearing that you all need me to make decisions faster. I'm hearing that you're having resource problems. We need to hire people faster. I'm hearing, whatever those things were, what we're going to do to fix that. So that's a great way to listen. Do you have a way to listen to your clients? Do you have a way to listen to your employees? Do you have a way to listen to your vendors, right? How are you attracting that information into your company and then doing something about it?
That's really interesting. Do you have have you ever written a blog post or something that is, here's 52 weeks of 1 question you could ask your team and give feedback?
If anyone is listening wants to text 33777 and you just put my name, Chris, as the message, I will send you a starter list of 25 questions. I'll send you a PDF, and I'll also send you some ideas about how to make your meetings not suck so much. So it's kind of in that document. Happy to share that with anybody that wants it.
That's great. That's great. And then how do you feel about the best workplace surveys? Are those also like no, or do those have any value?
Those are fine. They have value in that getting that award, getting that recognition is great for your team. It's great for your company. It's great for attracting, good talent. I think those are worthwhile.
Yeah.
Kind of create some show. Because if you're a terrible company, no matter how much they try to get people to say nice things, you're not going to end up in the top category, right? Unless you're doing a fairly good job, you're not going to be recognized as the best place to work. So it's a good thing to do if you have a good culture going.
Okay. And then the other thing I'm thinking about the listening is you brought up this, what data are we missing? Mm-hmm. So is that part of how you listen, is as you hear things, you slow yourself down enough to ask, okay, I'm hearing this. What data am I missing? So it's kind of like active listening on steroids, where you kind of think about what question I can ask.
Yeah, we had this problem with a department that they had noticed that the department used to be, from a productivity standpoint, at a certain level. And, we had lost some people, gained new people, and the department had kind of shifted and changes. And their productivity was really off. And did we hire the wrong people? Was it the manager? We couldn't figure out what was going on. And so we started doing some surveying of that. And what we realized is they were complaining about the work, that we were getting a sense that there was something wrong, right?
Yeah.
And so I finally I don't know what caused me to say this, but I went back to the manager and said, you know what? Let us go back and just grab a few people and repeat the training from the very beginning, but I want you to bring in one of the other managers when you do some of that. And let's just see if we're missing something. Are we skipping a step? If we don't do something right, maybe we're not giving them what they need, right? Because it doesn't make any sense. They did it one time and immediately called me and said, well, we found the problem. It was like, oh, well, what happened? And they said, nobody ever bought them their second monitor. We were hiring all these new people in this department that was growing, got a new manager along the way, and somehow that manager didn't know that it was their job when that new person got hired to make sure that, because we automatically sent everyone a laptop. They got to pick their laptop. We gave a budget. They could pick whatever one they wanted. And a lot of people were picking this laptop that was 15 inches. It was not very big, free.
Yeah, yeah.
And their job was to have like 50 windows open at a time. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just silly. And so we would get them second, sometimes third monitors so they could be productive and manage all those windows. And here we have like 12 people trying to work on a 15-inch monitor with 50 or 60 windows open.
Oh,
We're not productive.
oh yeah, crazy.
Well, $150 fixed, right? And all of a sudden these people are right back where we used to have them.
Yeah.
That was our fault, right? Yeah, that was that missing data. We had to go looking for that and try to ask questions and try to figure out what was going on. And, and then all of a sudden it was, as they were going through, the other manager said, well, when do you get in their monitor? Man, what do you mean? I don't get them monitor. Whoa.
That's a great example. Love it. Love it. Okay. Now we got listening. So what's the next fourth one?
You go to would be measurement, right? So the best organizations know how to measure what matters. And so this could be everything from really big things, or you're measuring your profitability, you're measuring what clients are good or bad, or giving you the most tickets or not. Those are big things. But like on the little thing, if you care, right? Like let's just say that it's really important to you as a leader that your people help their teammates, or that they recognize their teammates. They tell them good job. This small thing. How do you measure that?
Yeah.
Because if it matters to you, then you ought to be measuring it in some way. So that means like, if you have a recognition thing, are you somehow keeping track? Are we doing that?
Yeah.
Maybe it matters that people are helping each other. Like, is there something you're doing to make sure that if you value that outcome, are you making sure that the activity is happening?
Yeah.
So we find that if you actually start measuring some of that stuff, and not only measuring it to give a bonus or to promote something, don't make it like where people feel like they're doing it just because they're supposed to, but hey, I noticed that Tom and Billy and Susie or whatever, you all jumped in to help David on this project. Thank you so much. Like calling it out, like making a big deal on it, because that's the behavior you want. Goes back to the positivity pillar, right? We're making a big deal about the things that we do want, so we get more of that, and ignoring the stuff that we don't want because we're not going to put attention on that. And that's going to start to go away when we're telling people, oh, I love this. This is great. I want more of this. You get attention when you act this way. When you act that way, I'm not going to pay attention to you. I'm not going to give you a reading. I'm not going to give you any of my time and energy because I don't want that. Right?
Yeah, and I like it too, because it goes back to what you said earlier, is that you're not saying measure everything, but really pause and think about what matters most. Let's measure that stuff. And some of the stuff may seem small, like thanking someone for doing something, but those are important.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. The next
What's
one
next?
ties into this is recognition. So organizations have a recognition program. I'm a huge advocate for just something where you're saying thank you, patting someone on the back, recognizing them. I do in my book give you a totally different example to go against my belief. How do you do it if you want to have it be a whole thing with prizes and $1 million recognition program that I went in and studied Caesars Entertainment that does it really well. For most companies, you don't need to spend millions of dollars on a recognition program. You just need to create the space and the opportunity for people to say thank you. I don't think it works when it's, give a $10 gift card or give points to so-and-so, and then eventually they get a $20, because people game that stuff. Right? They find ways to game it. So we created in our Slack channel a water cooler room. And this water cooler room, you were allowed to share anything you wanted that was work appropriate. My kid won the soccer championship. I got married, I went on vacation, whatever. But it was also the place where we did what we called green flags. So if you saw someone do something amazing, how they helped you out, you went in there and said, hey, David had me on his podcast today. It went great. Green flag, way to go. And everyone who was online would jump in and say, hey, way to go. That must have been fun. Cool. Send me the link when you're done. Like, they would just make it. And that was it.
Yeah.
We said thank you. It was simple. It was public. So people could get that recognition across the organization. But I didn't pull them up on stage because a lot of introverted people do not want that experience.
Yeah.
Right? So it was enough for the extroverts. We minimized enough for the introverts that it worked for everyone and was public in that. We never tracked for them. We never gave bonuses on them. Nothing like that. You could sense that certain people always got green flags. I mean, you kind of knew who the real were in the organization. But that I measured, was it happening? Not that, but I was where we seeing consistently people thinking, green flagging in there. And if we saw a dip, that was an indication to me, are people stressed out? There's too much going on. Are they forgetting to do it? I would need to go back and start pushing a little bit and remind people like us people like us celebrate our wins, that we call out our teammates, that we are champion. We are there to, put them up on that pedestal when the time is right.
Yeah.
So that was important. For me, that was the way I measured it. And you could measure anything you want, right? If it's important to you, go measure it and it'll happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of different ways to do recognition, but I think that's certainly something that worked for you, and that's great.
Yeah.
What's next?
The next pillar, let's see, uniqueness. Uniqueness is, how do we celebrate what makes us unique? So that can be on a marketing perspective. How do we show up in the marketplace with our unique proposition and our unique view and our features and benefits and all that stuff, right? You better be able to do that if you want to have a company. But when it gets to our people, how do we think about what makes them unique? And that we talk a little bit about focusing on their strengths, so we know what their strengths are so that we can leverage those things, right? If this person's strengths is out talking to people, I don't need them over here creating reports. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And but we have people that, well, I can do that. But wait a minute, is that aligned with who you are and your strength? We don't allow people just to jump on stuff if it's not really aligned with what makes them a value of the organization. So also in our hiring techniques, we noticed that people unintentionally had all these biases, right? Where they were bringing people in for interviews that had similar likes that they did, and were schools that they went to, or in the same fraternity or sorority, or there was something that connected them that made them the same. And that was what got them the interview. That's what got them hired. It took us a while to train our people. I wanted you to get curious about what makes that person unique. What makes them of value? How did they come in and help us in the organization in a way that we don't have right now?
Yeah.
That's going to challenge the way we think. And so that really helped give people that training and freedom. And once they understood that, was a kind of like a mind, oh yeah, I was doing that. I didn't realize I was doing that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Potentially being biased. But until we trained them, they were like, okay. If this person, is coming in to do bookkeeping, it doesn't really matter if we both like the Red Sox, does it? It doesn't. It's a stupid reason to hire somebody,
Yeah. Being aware of that bias is important.
Wow.
And then while at the same time confirming they can still match with your culture and the needs of the role. Yeah. Right. So that's great.
Right. And matching with the culture is tricky because we want that culture to evolve and grow over time. We don't want to keep hiring that same person over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to get stuck. We don't want to get stale. That's how you end up, you're at a particular revenue point and you just don't ever seem to be getting over that. Sometimes you need fresh minds, fresh perspectives, different ways of doing things, people with different experiences, different networks and connections. They're going to help you get to that next level. And you're not going to do that by saying, well, let's go hire someone just like the 5 other people we just hired.
Well, but with a culture match, I'm talking more that, we have the same values. They agree with the mission. They agree with the vision on where you're going to go. They're comfortable with the boundaries you have for accountability. I call those the four company culture cornerstones. But so, because if you don't have a values match, they can bring in some ideas, but that can maybe take you where you don't want to go.
Well, I found that when we surveyed our people, when I asked them what their values were at work, we could not have had a more wide-ranging, completely different, scope of answers. But what was important was that they were behind and believed in what the company's values were and said, I understand those, I like those, I'm willing to support those, and I'm willing to do the work that it takes for us to continue to show up that way, even if their personal work values might be slightly different or
totally agree.
Focus and different things, right? Like one of my personal values is travel. I love travel. I think going on an airplane and going to meet new people, going to conferences is like one of the best things. But that wasn't a value for the organization.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a difference there. But my loving travel would help the organization meet some of its other values and goals and things that we wanted to do, right? So, yeah. So it's interesting. The next one, I think we're on number 7.
I think so. Yeah.
Is mistakes. So you'll notice all the other ones are sort of this like positive thing. The last one is mistakes. How your organization deals with mistakes will fundamentally determine your trajectory. So quick little explanation. There's a difference between mistakes and errors. Errors should not be tolerated. If your job is to do payroll every month and you cannot figure out the calculations and you keep punching in the numbers wrong, it's not a mistake. That is you're either not trained properly, you're apathetic, you're drunk on the job, like I don't know what's going on. But you can't put numbers into a spreadsheet and get people paid every month and that's your job. There's an error happening there, right? And not keeping tolerated. Mistakes are, I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm trying something new. Based on the information I had, I made the best decision I could in this moment. And now a week later, we have new information. Turns out that was the wrong choice. But in that moment, I tried to do the right thing, and that was the right decision. Anybody else would have made that same decision in that moment with that information. And so we need to celebrate people being willing to make that decision and then adjust it later on. We need to thank them for being brave enough to go and try that new thing or make that decision with what information they had, and then learn from those that didn't work out and share that information with our team and our boss and our company. We had a oops, my bad room in Slack as well. And with the green flag and the recognition, we really had to train our people to run that and actually dissuade our leaders from being the first ones to thank people, because we didn't want it to be top down. We need to be bottom up for recognition. But when it comes to mistakes, it's the complete opposite. We needed our leaders to show up first and say, this is the stupid thing I did. This was the mistake I made. This is how I fixed it. This is what I learned from it. This is how we, saved the client account. And then people felt safe to show up and do the same thing because the leaders had done it and showed no one's going to get yelled at, no one's going to get screamed at, no one's going to get fired because you were trying to do the right thing. Southwest Airlines had some troubles recently. They were famous for, I think they still have this policy now, even though they've gotten rid of their 2 free bags free. They would never publicly say anything bad about an employee. If something happened and they were in the news or whatever, the employee thought they were doing the right thing. If they tried to help the customer, right? Their intentions were good. They were, even if it ended up being the wrong decision.
Yeah.
We backed that employee up publicly. That privately, they may have retrained and given them advice on how to do differently next time. But their policy was to never say our employee did the wrong thing. It was our employee made the best decision at that moment. We back them, and we'll look at how we can improve things going forward next time.
Yeah.
That kind of confidence, your company has your back, that you can make a decision. You don't, because how many leaders, how many bosses and managers complain that everyone comes to them, no one will make a decision. You got people like, they just, here, boss, you tell me what to do. I want to do the wrong thing. And so you're stuck as the leader having to make all these gazillion decisions you shouldn't have to make.
Oh, yeah.
Exhausted. I did an entire year where I refused to make a decision for anybody. It was because my organization was so stuck on me being that final decision maker, stamp approval thing. I just kept saying, well, what do you think we should do? You go make the best decision you think and let me know how it goes. And if it doesn't work out, we'll figure it out. If it does. And I just kept putting it back on that. Now, with rare exception, there was a few moments when they were going to go do something illegal or something I knew was going to cost us way too much money and I would stop them. But 99.9% of the time it was, even if I knew they were going to go screw it up, but that screw up was okay, was a learning thing, I let them go, have that practice of making that decision, figuring it out, right? And then coming back to me and saying, well, that ended up being the wrong decision, but I figured out what we should do is this. Awesome.
Yeah, I had an entrepreneur I knew, Zach Schuler, had an 80% rule. If they were going to be 80% right, he just let them do it.
Let them do it.
Yeah, let them do it. And they're going to learn through it by doing it and owning it. Chris, this has been awesome. So, and I'm glad we had the time to walk through the 7 pillars. Yeah. And I mean, you've got chrisdyer.com if people want to learn more, but should they look for your stuff or connecting with you any other way? I mean, I really appreciate it. And your success with culture has been amazing. And we just been the tip of the iceberg, I'm sure, with our conversation. So we're just
connect. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram. Chris D. Dyer 7 is my handle, except on TikTok, I'm chrisdyer.com. So, but happy to connect there. And thanks so much for having me on the show.
Oh, I loved it. Thank you so much, Chris. This has been great.
All right. Thank you.